alaikum, ladies. Welcome to our monthly halaqa. Today we're going to be discussing caring for a child with special needs. We have Sister Nesibe Takimoglu, who is a mother of 3. She's currently working in education and serving many roles as psychology, humanities teacher, a mentor, and a VCA teacher. In 1997, she completed her Bachelor of Foreign Language Teaching in Turkey. And then in 2008, she completed her Master of Education in Melbourne. And then she completed a Master of Counselling in Melbourne as well. She's passionate about meeting individuals' needs of the children, since their needs can vary specifically. And she's also raised a child with special needs. I love hearing her stories. The way she talks about her son, she just like literally lights up when we hear these stories. So inshallah, today she'll be shedding some light on the topic itself. She'll draw on some of her personal experiences and some of her learnings in her psych degree, and just some tips and tricks that we can basically carry on and implement in our lives as well. So take it away, Sister Nesibe.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for having me tonight. I went back to the lockdown. Sorry, for 2 years we were online on Zoom, and I went back to those times. Again, I forgot about the Zoom. I haven't been using it for a long time, but it's good to be back. I'll start with a dua, inshallah, and then we can start talking. So, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wal aqibatu lil muttaqeen, was salatu was salamu ala rasulina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin tibbil qulubi wa dawaiha, wa afiyatil abdani wa shifaiha, wa nurul absari wa diyaiha, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Ameen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Can I share my screen?
Yep. Yeah, you can. I'll make you a co-host.
Right. Okay. So I'll start. I didn't really prepare any fancy slides or anything. It's just basically for me not to forget the things that I wanted to mention. Before starting, can I just ask a question just to make sure that I am going on to the right path? Because I kind of thought two kind of a path in presentation. The first one was if most of the guests tonight, the audience is basically the parents, the mothers, or maybe close family members of someone with special needs, I would kind of follow a different path. But if it is more of the regular Isra, people in the ladies in Halakha group that are here tonight to hear something, maybe a different thing that they don't usually listen in the sohbet. So can I ask who is, or how many of you are a close family, or like the parents or a close family of someone with special needs? I can see Sister Saida,
Yep.
another one, 2, 3. So it's 3, right? Yes. Okay. So not many. So I thought maybe because I don't want to go through the things that you already know. So I wasn't sure really. So I put everything on the slides, but I'll skip some of the parts that I don't need to go through. So I'll just introduce my son. He's the reason I am here tonight. His name is Ajmal. And I call him my guest from heaven, and I'll explain why I call him that later on. And this is him. He is 22 years old. He has autism, and he has autism spectrum disorder, and he also has moderate to severe intellectual disability. He was born in 2000, February 2000, so he's just 22 now. I also have 2 other kids. I have another son who is 11 and a daughter who is nearly 7. So I've got a bit of a gap in between the last 2 and the first one. Because not many of you, we have 20 people in, which means 19 audience, and only 3 of you are close family of someone who has special needs. Maybe I can just follow. Okay, why did
Nesibe, 2 or 3 people as well said that after, so from there I counted about 5 or 6.
Okay, all right. So okay, we have about 40 minutes, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on the negatives and horror stories or anything. I'll just mention a couple of things as someone who has, who has special needs child, a couple of things that maybe the people who don't have anyone in the family would never really imagine or would never considered before, because they have never witnessed that before. So I'll quickly tell you a story of my son's diagnosis and how we came to today. So he was born in 2000. I was 25 years old then. I came to Australia when I was 24. I don't have any relatives here. My husband doesn't have any relatives here. We didn't have any relatives. We came into a community which was great. My husband was a teacher at a school. I was a teacher at the school. So we had a community, but we didn't have close family or any relatives. So because he was my first child, but before starting that, sorry, I'll quickly say something just to clarify. There is a saying that if you know someone with autism, you know someone with autism, one person with autism, because none of the people with autism is basically exactly the same. We can generalize. And now that our topic is special needs children, imagine that, I personally, as a mom who has a special needs son of 20 years, I wouldn't really imagine, or I wouldn't really assume that I would understand the people who have, the mothers who have special needs kids that have different diagnoses than I am. It could be ADHD, it could be a physical disability, it could be another problem with the brain functioning, neurodiversity type of disability. It could be many of the others, and I assume that the challenges that they go through are quite different than mine. So that's why this is my story, and please excuse me if you feel like I am going into your space and taking the role. If you have something else to mention, if you want to come in and add things, please feel free to do so. This is only my story and my son's story, basically. So he was diagnosed at the age of 3, the exact diagnosis. But as a mom, I was, especially after the age of 2, I was quite, I realized that something was wrong, but I didn't know what to do. There was an internet, but internet wasn't into our lives that much then. So Google wasn't our, the scholar then, so we weren't asking Google things. But I knew that something was wrong. I had the instinct, but unfortunately, the first thing was obviously convincing my husband. I went to the speech therapist. I convinced my husband. We went to a speech therapist. And I'll just quote what he said. It was really funny. She said that, oh, no, there is nothing wrong with him. You both are uni graduate parents. You are overthinking. You think that you know everything. You provide everything to him before he asks. That's why he is like that. So go away, come back in another 6 months if you are still worried, which made me basically lose about 4 or 5 months, which bring me, I went home with a lot of guilt, and I lost my trust in my own insight as a mom. I never thought that I had anyway, but I questioned my own insight. Anyway, so this was quite a hard time for about a year. So at first, the speech therapist sent us back. Then I was sure that something was wrong. I kind of insisted on that. I went to GP. A GP sent us to a pediatrician. He was on the waiting list for the assessments. I went to Turkey in that time, in the waiting period. I stayed in Turkey, and he was diagnosed in Turkey when I was alone with my son there. My husband was here. Then I came back after the age of 3. I was working then. I was working as a teacher, and I was also doing my master's as well at Melbourne University. I stopped my studying. I stopped working as well. I was full with him with the interventions and everything until him. The only place I heard autism was the movie Rain Man. I don't know if any of you watched it. It's Dustin Hoffman's, one of the classics, basically, where the guy had an autism, and that's the only thing I knew about autism. And whoever I told about his diagnosis, people would say, oh, Elaine, man, he's a genius. Your son is going to be genius. That's the first thing that I used to hear from everyone. But in reality, it wasn't like that. Those genius people with autism are only about, with today's, we know that they are only about 2 to 3% of the people, the population of, the people with autism. About 70%, 65 to 70% are moderate to mild, but about 30-40% are quite severe. My son is in that 30-40% of that group. The diagnosis, all the, everything after that, him starting to school, we changed the city, he started a school in Sydney, getting him used to the school routine and everything. So when I really reflect back on those days, the only thing I want to tell you about that whole time was that I was actually quite restless and frustrated before his diagnosis. So most of the times when I hear from people, from the mothers whose kids have been diagnosed with special needs, some of them would describe how they felt helpless, disappointed, sad, scared at the diagnosis. I don't know if it's the right word to say still, but what I felt was actually relief. Because when he was diagnosed, because until then, about a year, maybe a bit more than a year, was basically all about blame, guilt. I was blaming myself. I am working, I'm studying, I was studying, I'm working, I'm leaving him to just babysitters. I don't have anyone to support me. We don't have anyone to tell us what exactly is happening. We don't know what's happening. Is there really something wrong? Am I misreading the signs? Look, this was all the doubts and guilt and blame, sometimes blaming my husband or myself. So it was just this, when I think of those days, I imagine that really gray clouds over me at that age. When he was diagnosed, it was, yes, obviously I panicked. I was panicking for the future. I was panicking of what's going to happen now, obviously, but that was also a relief. There was a name there, there was a diagnosis that I could run after and find the interventions and everything. So that period was a bit different for me, I guess, maybe from some of the other parents with special needs. And when I was preparing the slides, I just wanted to put up some of the dot points that I could think of that were really hard and that are really hard even today. His self-care, teaching him the self-care, the sleep habits. I don't know if any of you have someone with autism in the family, but sleep is a huge, huge problem. For about 10 years, in the first 10 years, I don't think I slept the whole night full. He can't sleep, he wasn't able to sleep. Still he can't sleep, even melatonin doesn't work most of the times. Anyway, so sleep was a huge issue. Car rides are still a huge issue for us. He has a lot of obsessions. If you have one window open on the side, you have to have the other one open as well. They all have to be open fully, or they have to be closed fully. If someone in the car at the back opens the window, he gets really frustrated and he hits the driver, whoever is there. I had a lot of slaps from him and I was driving. It's still a problem. He gets really scared of the horns of the cars outside. That's a huge thing. Toilet training was a disaster. I don't want to go into that. Doctor visits for years. He never let any doctor to look into his throat, ears. No x-rays for years. So dentists and doctor visits, blood tests, they all had to be, if they are really, really necessary, they had to be done with a full anesthesia. So it was crazy for many, many years, but alhamdulillah, now he's over that. We even managed to get a blood for the blood tests recently, which we were celebrating as a whole house, because we arranged all the day care stay at the operation, for the operation at the hospital. Everything was arranged, but we just wanted to try, and it worked. So it was a huge celebration for the family. Traveling, the last time I flight with him to Turkey was in 2013. In 2019, we went to New Zealand as a family as well. We we had that trip too. The traveling in the public, buses, trains, and in planes is a totally different story for us. All the social functions, school, friendships, these are about him. So these were the things that as I said, I'm not going to go into details. I don't want to turn this tonight into a story where I kind of imply, what kind of a great mother I am dealing with all these, hardships or anything. But I know that, especially for the ones who have them in the family, or you could have observed, it's hard. It's hard because you don't know what's going to come. You can never be prepared enough. I can easily say that now because I have two other kids after him. When I go outside or when I go into any new situation, I can prepare myself. I can prepare them. I can prepare their bags, toys, foods, clothes, everything. But with Ejmal, it's always hard. You never know what's going to happen there, how he's going to react. So these were some of the things that we went through. And when I look at these, I can see that most of the problems either hasn't changed over the years, or they were over, but the new ones came and replaced them. But it's really interesting to see how I changed over the years, and how my attitude changed over the years, how the way I see things, the way I react or respond to things, I should say, changed. How I interpret his behavior, or even in general, his existence changed over the year. And that's what I wanted to, basically, I came here to tell you about, tonight. Because I remember before he was born, I was 25, as I said, when I became a mom. Both my husband and myself, we studied in Turkey, in one of the best universities in Turkey. I personally, as a student, I never struggled as a student academically, never. I never failed any of my exams. I was most of the times top of the students. Then I became a teacher. I came to Australia, became a teacher, and I realized that for those first couple of years of teaching, I wasn't really fair to my students, because even though I studied, educational psychology, developmental psychology, special needs, individual learnings and everything, individual learning plans and everything, we didn't have them as much as we had that in the past, but they were still there. I realized that I didn't really understand this whole, the uniqueness of everyone, and how our abilities are very unique, and how Allah is the one that, designs and plans everything for us. It's not us who does things. I especially after him, maybe one of the first things that I was tested was being able to teach him something. So it was quite ironic, really. Both myself and my husband were teachers. We were pretty good teachers. We were able to teach our subject in 2 different languages. So I'm educated in Turkey, but I can also teach my subject in English here. So it was quite ironic, really, that we were able to teach. My husband is a physics teacher, hardest subject at high school, probably one of the hardest, I should say. And his students always, praise him of being a really great teacher. But then you have your own child that comes into your life, and you are supposed to teach him the basic, simple things in daily life. I'll just give you one example. This is usually what I give as an example in this topic. Oh my God, we have more than 40 people. Oh, I shouldn't have looked at that. Okay. Teaching him his name, for example. Okay, so the ones that are aware of what autism is knows what echolila is. Echolila is basically a child who is repeating whatever you tell to them. So I would ask him, what is your name? And he would just say, what is your name? By the way, my son had a language, or even though the words were limited, he was able to produce the words and sentences, but it was either a kolayla, basically just repeating what you talk to him, either a kolayla or some of the sentences that he hears from TV or from his friends, and that's it. So we were trying to teach him to tell his name when we ask, what is your name? And he wasn't able to answer that question. We used to have a role play with my husband. What is your name? My name is Nesibe. What is your name? My name is Sada. What is your name? We would turn to him and he would say, what's your name? And it's not an exaggeration. I think we kind of practiced this maybe more than 1,000 times, maybe days and months, years actually, but we couldn't teach him to say that. We couldn't. I remember we went to overseas Turkey. My dad is an imam and he's hafiz as well, and he's educating. He has his own students that are studying to become hafiz as well. He said, no, you didn't try enough, let me try. Okay, so he sat down for days again, and he couldn't teach him to say his name. Later on, I don't think I realized it at the time, but later on, when this is only one of the experiences that we had, there were so many of them. You would ask him, how are you? And he would just say, how are you? He never said fine until the age of 20. The first time we asked him, how are you? And he said, fine. I cried. He was 20 years old. We had this, two-way conversation, probably the first time, like a meaningful conversation. So I don't think I realized it at that time, but later on when I really reflected on it, I realized how ignorant I was in terms of, who we are, what are we doing in this world really, who is in charge of us, who is in charge of our lives, and who is letting us learn, or who is letting us teach. If he doesn't let us learn, if he doesn't let us teach, would we be really able to do any of these? It was such an interesting, now that I reflect on it, and later on when I reflected on it, that was I think the huge enlightenment in my life later on to realize. So I can't, okay, I'll just go to, okay, I'll come, sorry, the slides, the order of the slides, I kind of changed them now in my head. That's why I put my spiritual tools up there to talk about. So the first point, I think here, that's what I mentioned, the first and second point, the experience of having a child like that, I think taught me who I am in this world. And when I say taught me, yes, we all know that. We all know that theoretically. But I can say that I think, especially, obviously, this is not a state of, it's not a static state that you feel all the time. But I can say that I can even remember the times where I felt so weak, so impotent, so weak that I'm so alone, so weak. There is no one to turn to. There is no causes in the world that we didn't try. I can tell you so many funny stories that sounds funny now, but at the time they were quite draining, really. When he was first diagnosed, we went to Turkey. I visited so many imams and who are dealing with, jinns. I'm not going to go into that. That's a totally different story. But I visited so many of them. I paid so much money into those. I visited so many alternative therapies, doctors, psychologists, counselors. You basically, what you do is you are just, whoever tells you that there is a cure there, supposedly, or if there is something that you can maybe achieve here, you would just turn there, run there, try and get that from there. Those were the times that I would knock all the doors, and even if I have the money, even if I have the family that's supporting me, the friends that are there ready to help, if I ask for it, the institutions there, the government was there, with all the fundings and support workers and everything. There were very simple things that for a normal child, you could easily achieve. You don't even realize that that's a milestone, but with him, it was a huge deal. And those are the times, and still those are the times where I think I feel most of the impotency that I have in my nature as a human being. I'm sent to this world. I'm sent to this world with a mission of worshiping Allah. I'm given all the tools that I need to use in this way as an abd, as a slave to him. But it's so easy to really forget why I am here, you know, in day-to-day life. But those are the times, those are the moments where I would feel so lonely and so weak that I can only survive, or I could only survive if I turn my face towards him. Who is he? He is the one that is Al-Qadir, who has all the power. He is the one who is Ar-Rahman, who has all the mercy, who has all the Ar-Rahim, who has the compassion. He is the one who is Al-Hakim, who has the wisdom. He creates everything for a reason. So, you know, knowing who I am and knowing who he is, I think knowing who I am, basically, you know, understanding or feeling my weakness and poverty was a way of knowing who he is, kind of knocking his door and turning my face towards him and knowing that only he can help me. Because that's when you learn that it's not you who is teaching, it's Allah who lets that person to learn. And you are only one of the causes, the wasila, to teach a child. If Allah doesn't let that happen, no one else can. And I think having a special needs child is, in that sense, I don't know, I don't want to offend anyone, but the word that I am going to use is opportunity. But it's an opportunity that we can, as parents of special needs kids, we can really feel that we are the weak, we are the ignorant, that we don't really know. We don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't even know what's going to happen in the next minute. We don't know anything. He's the one, he knows everything. He's Al-Alim. So those were the experiences, these emotional and cognitive experiences, those thoughts that were going through my head at the times, at those moments where I would turn my face towards Allah, where I would understand who I am and who he is. And with that one, I've got one as a symbolic representation of that, who I am and who he is. That's basically the definition of the faith. I understand who I am and who he is. And what's my relationship with him? I love the dua of Waisar Karani. It is a special dua, a special supplication that he has that starts, I'll go to the next slide to show you. I love this dua. I read this a lot every day, definitely, sometimes more than once a day. And I would advise anyone to use this tool, this special tool, to really deal with those moments where you feel that you don't have any power over yourself, your kids, your family, your life. Nothing is in your hands, really. That's the time where I would read that dua, which reminds me again that I am, that's how I am supposed to feel, to be able to really understand who my creator is. So this is the dua of Waisar Karani. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I'll just read you a couple of pieces from there. Ilahi anta rabbi wa ana al-abd. So you are the Rabb, you are the sustainer, and I am the one, and I am abd, I am the slave of you. Wa anta khaliq wa ana al-makhluq. You are the one who created, I am the one that is created. Wa anta razzaq wa ana al-marzuq. You are the one who provides, who sustains us, and we are the one that are provided by you. Wa anta al-malik wa ana al-mamluk. You are the owner of everything and we belong to you. So the rest of the dua is basically explaining our relationship with Allah, who he is and who we are. So that was my, I guess my, in terms of the spiritual tools that I had, the first tool that I had was my faith. But when I say my faith, who am I believing in? Who is my creator? So the names of Allah, the beautiful names of Allah helped a lot to me. Depending on the situation, depending on the hardship that I had at the time, I would focus on that name. If it is about trying to teach something to him, I would use the name Al-Alim. If it is something that I'm really worried about for the future, I would recite the name Al-Hakim, Al-Basir, Al-Sami, etc. So whichever name I found at the time that is the most relevant, that is the one that connects me to him at the time, the one that I need the relationship at the time, I would focus on that one. Then another tool, the next tool is again related to that one that I already talked about, saying a lot of Bismillah. So with the really meaning of it, I'm trying to say Bismillah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim a lot. So you know how they teach us the mindfulness strategies of counting until 10 for the anger management or for controlling anxiety, etc. Yes, they help physiologically. We have an explanation for it in psychology, how our brain and nervous system works. I'm not going to go into that. Yes, but why at the time, instead of counting to 10, I focus on saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, which means that, you know, I am so powerless and I feel that powerlessness now. I feel it. I'm so weak and I don't have any tools in me, in my body that can help me. But I know that if I take Allah's power, or if I could, you know, take his power onto my shoulders. I don't know if it's the right words to explain it, but if I turn my face towards him, if I take his name, if I put my trust in him and start with his name. So I'm not doing this in my name because I know that I don't have the power, because I know that I don't have the tools, but he does. He can change things just like that. Kun feyekun, remember? He would say, you know, be, and it would be. So why would I try and deal with it with my own lacking, you know, power, or with my the capacity that I don't have? I can turn towards him, I can use his name, and I can say, Bismillah, in the name of him, I will get what I need from him. If he lets this happen, it will happen. So Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. You know, I use that a lot in the situations where I feel really helpless. And I do feel that a lot. Today, my daughter had the COVID test positive last night. So all the kids and myself, we are at home today. We had COVID only 2 months ago. We are at home again. So in the morning, and I couldn't reach the bus driver for my son that takes him to daycare. So the bus came in the morning. And I couldn't do anything because I messaged the bus driver. He didn't see it. And he came in the morning. It was a disaster because the bus came and he was supposed to go. We didn't let him go. It was a huge problem. So before I knew that was going to happen, so before that I started to read some Sakina onto him. Then when I heard the bus, you know, horn outside, I started to say, Bismillah, Bismillah, Bismillah. He ran to the door, he unlocked the door, I hold his hand. I was trying to explain to bus driver, and I was also holding his hand. He's 134 kilos, by the way, because he wanted to go into bus and we were preventing him to go. And I was just saying in my head and in my heart, I was just saying, Bismillah, Bismillah. And I believe it helped. It helped because I knew that if he lost the control at the time, there is nothing that I can do. There's nothing the bus driver can do as well. There is nothing that he can do. He's 184 and 130, nearly 136 kilos. There is no way that I can, you know, hold him. But he was okay afterwards. Then we came in, I prepared the breakfast, whatever, we dealt with it. So I try and use the tool Bismillah a lot as well, because as soon as I know that, as soon as I realize that I am weak, I am powerless, when I turn my face towards Allah and act in his name, then it becomes my strength. And I really feel strong at the time. I honestly feel very strong. Again, another tool. Sorry, I'll just get it. That I would use is supplication, dua. And with dua, we know the importance of dua. I'm not going to go into that. But for me personally, and this is something that I read in other resources, in the resources as well, in the religious resources as well. But I felt this in my heart, in my whole being, basically. The most important function of dua in my life is taking my loneliness away, my isolation away. Only the parents of special needs kids would know how lonely or isolated you would feel sometimes, because then you become a parent, even if you don't have anyone in your family, anyone from your family or any close family until then. When you have a child, you find yourself, because I know that from the other kids that I have, when you have a child, you suddenly become a part of a larger community. You go onto the Facebook groups, you go to the play groups in the council, you send your child to childcare, you meet the parents there. It's a totally new door into new world. You go into the world of the mothers of the other normal kids. You make your play dates, and you suddenly become a part of a community. And all the developmental stages are expected with the normal kids, within the range. The milestones are there. You celebrate them. You know what's going to come. I'm not talking about the adolescent puberty behavior, but I'm just more talking about the technical developmental milestones. You know what's going to come, what your child would be able to achieve in a range. So there are things to share, etc. But when you have a special needs child, you are suddenly isolated from the other parents as well, even from them, because you are not a normal parent anymore, you are a special needs parent. Suddenly, even the parents, someone who has 5, 6, 7 kids, they don't know what to tell you. They don't know how to comfort you. They don't want to offend you, but they don't. So they kind of stay away, or they kind of ignore. It's like the elephant in the room sometimes. And you feel so isolated, not only maybe physically, not physically maybe, but psychologically, spiritually, and sometimes physically as well. You can't go to some of the functions. You can't go, even if you go to the programs, you can't really concentrate on what's happening because you have to keep supervising your kid. So I personally go through this isolation and loneliness a lot still as well. And for me, the most important function of dua and supplication is that I know in my heart, and I feel that whenever I open my hands and I call, oh Allah, I know that He listens, He's there. And He's not like a counselor, or I'm not, by the way, dealing counselors or anything. I'm a counselor myself, but it's not like a counselor or your husband or your mom or another human being who are powerless as well at the end of the day, because we can't change the situation. But Allah has the power to change everything if He thinks it is the best, if it is in accordance with His wisdom, His hikmah. You know that, and that person who controls the whole universe, who controls every single, of one of us, says destiny, everything about us. As soon as I call Him, He listens to me. I know that because this is in the Quran. He promises that. He promises that He is going to answer my prayers. So knowing that, sometimes my supplications are more automatic, robotic. I'm not really there with a full heart. But I can tell you sincerely that I do have, some occasions where I feel so lonely. I have 2 other kids. I have my husband. I have great friends, really. I'm in a great community, alhamdulillah. But sometimes we are very lonely. So those are the times where I make sure that, especially at nights, when there's not a lot of distractions around from the kids, from Ejmal, from the other kids as well, or from the daily work, I make dua. I sit down, I read Waisal Karani's dua, I read Joshan, I read other duas that I can, I look at the meanings. But I know that as soon as I start having, making my dua, I know that he is there and listening to me. And I guess this is the most powerful thing, a tool that we all, not only as parents with special needs, but as parents and also as abds, as worshippers of him, that we can have in this world. And we go through all those, whatever the calamities or everything that we have to go through. And loneliness is an epidemic at the moment in the Western world. We know that. So I don't think we are using this tool enough, but I personally try and use this. So what time is it? I don't know. Am I over the time, Zainab?
You're 7:40, but I'm really keen on hearing this. I'm happy if you guys are happy to keep going. We're happy.
I'll quickly go through the other three as well. So tawakkul, again, is another tool that we all know the meaning. It's placing our trust in God. I love this analogy that explains what tawakkul is. If you go onto a ship with your load on your shoulders, the baggage on your shoulders, you go onto ship. When the ship starts to move, you would be expected to leave your, load onto the ship. You don't carry it yourself anymore. This became, how they, in Buddhism, they have mantras that they are used a lot in mindfulness and today's psychology, as well as affirmations. I actually use this as an affirmation. Leave your burden onto the ship, Nesibe. I tell them, the ship is already going. We are all in Allah's ship. The world is already moving somewhere. Things are already going to happen the way they are. And as long as I am already up onto the ship, I already did what I have to do. I did my best, and I know that it's never enough. Leaving my load, my burdens onto the ship is something that I try to do a lot. So tawakkaltu ala Allah, saying that a lot, saying that to myself a lot. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel, saying that a lot. So he is the one that knows. As long as he knows my situation, he is aware of my situation, that's enough. And I know that he knows my situation. So feeling that he knows my situation, being able to feel that connection, I think that's such a powerful tool. I try and use that a lot in my life. I use, as I said, like, leave your burden onto the ship. That's something that I keep telling to myself, and I find myself panicking a lot, or find myself anxious a lot. And hear the story of Hazrat Ibrahim when he was about to be sent into the fire. Jibreel alayhi salam comes to him and asks him if he wants anything. And Ibrahim alayhi salam says, does Allah know that I am in this situation? And he says, yes, he does. And Ibrahim alayhi salam says, Hasbi, enough. That's enough for me. When I told years ago, when my son diagnosed, all the healthcare workers, or the workers that I deal with, obviously it's their job and it's a great thing to do. They used to ask me, how are you? Are you okay? Is everything okay? Do you see a psychologist? And I started to feel like I was kind of frozen in a way. It was kind of, I think, a shock of what's happening. So I was kind of frozen. I wasn't really thinking much about myself. I was more on an automatic pilot, just trying to do what I have to do, interventions, therapies, psychologists and everything. I didn't really think much about myself. But then all this process of grief and how we go through those different processes of grief. And later on, it started to kind of sink in. I had some of the some depressive symptoms. And at the time, I remember my dad talking to me, and he said that, okay, this is a very unusual situation. Obviously, this is not normal. We don't have anyone around having everyone has normal kids. We don't have anyone going through that. This is very unusual. But my dad told me not to condition myself that it's going to be affecting me or my life really negatively, because he said that he asked me to read the verse from Quran that talks about that Hazrat Ibrahim situation, that tells the fire to be cool and safe. Ya naru kuni bardan wa salama. He said that Ibrahim alayhi salam was sent into the fire Allah didn't send a different solution. He could have sent a rain that would basically clear out the fire. He could send someone to save him. He didn't do that. He sent him into the fire, but he asked the fire not to burn him. There was a specific meaning there. There's a meaning there. So the same fire could burn the other things like the birds running around over it, but it didn't burn Hazrat Ibrahim. This is his miracle. But Allah also showed us that he is the one that burns, not the fire. The burning quality of the fire does not come from itself. Allah uses it whenever he wants. We know that because in the summer, those thin green leaves of the trees, they are not burned under the sun 40 degrees, 50 degrees. We know that the same fire, the same sun that burns me, makes me dehydrate, does not burn them. So the same fire that burned the birds flying over didn't burn Hazrat Ibrahim. So the same problem that maybe burns many people, that causes them go into depression, family separations, mental health problems, a lot of personal problems, financial problems, everything. It doesn't mean that it's going to burn you as well. So please just, read that, Ya narukuni badam salama alat. And I remember reading that a lot. And I remember getting a lot of relief and, sakina from that dua as well. I don't know if it does have any, base reading that dua, but that was a dua that was advised by my dad by reflecting on it this way. So the same fire that burns the others didn't burn Hazrat Ibrahim. It doesn't mean that because you go through this hardship, it doesn't mean that it's going to break you. It doesn't mean that it has to be a negative experience. So it can actually turn into a garden of rose, the way it turned into Hazrat Ibrahim. And when I look at myself today, I can see how much this experience changed me and how much it taught me, it taught to my husband, it teaches my other kids, his siblings. And I can see that, for many, maybe, I don't know, but for many, a fire that burns the families. I know many couples that couldn't, survive. They couldn't maintain their marriage, so they had to separate after a special needs kid. Or a lot of maybe other health problems or whatever. I'm not saying that, if they are having it, they don't have enough belief or faith, or I'm not saying that. I'm just giving you a perspective really here. I don't know if it makes sense. Also, again, managing my sabr, one of the tools that I use. We know that Allah guarantees, we know that it was on Miraj night, we have given this verse in the Quran, La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha. He doesn't burden us with the burdens that we can't carry. So he guarantees, there's a guarantee from Allah that we can trust, that if he gives us something, any problem, any calamity, or anything that's hard, any hardship, he gives us enough strength or power to deal with it. We know that. So knowing that is such an important, I believe, tool, because I know that I have enough sabr power in me as one of the iman powers, sabr power. I have it in me. I just need to learn to manage this power. Okay, so wasting that power, that sabr power on the past or to the future for the things that happened in the past, I could easily simply, sit here and tell you the stories about my son, what happened in the past 22 years. I have so many stories to tell, so many hardships. This was what happened. This is how much I couldn't sleep. This is how much I had to sacrifice. I can go through them, but they're all past, really. If you told me that he would come to the age of 22 and you would be talking about him smiling at the time, I don't know if I would really believe in you, really. But I did. I am doing that. 22 years passed, and alhamdulillah, he changed a lot. Some of the things didn't change. We are still learning. We are still improving. So wasting my patience power in the past, I'm trying not to do that. I'm not saying that I'm successful, but I'm trying not to do that. Again, wasting that power to the future. What is going to happen to him? What if I die? What if my husband dies? We don't have any relative. What if his siblings, can't look after him? What's going to happen to him? I try and stop myself. I know that he belongs to Allah, and Allah is the most compassionate and most merciful. He is the best of the planners. He has a plan. I, as a parent, only have to use whatever is given to me today. So I try and manage my sabr more for today. And this is what is being taught in modern psychology, mindfulness, living in the moment, making the most of the moment. And I think as Muslims, we have the best theory of that. We know that Allah gave us enough power, enough sabr power to deal with anything that we have. So if we can't deal with it, if we are really struggling to deal with it, we need to look into where we are using that power, where we are wasting that power. And I think I'm kind of practicing on that a lot, trying to stay in the moment, in present, not wasting my sabr into the past or future. And the last thing is 5 times a day. I know it's very cliche, but so praying 5 times a day is not a cliche, but saying that as a tool to deal with the hardships. But especially recently, in the last couple of years, I'm trying to more focus on the designated times to those 5 times a day. Why do I need to pray in the morning? It's the time where, okay, I learned that I have to focus my sabr power into today. There are so many things that are going to happen, so many hardships that I am going to go through maybe today. That's the time in the morning when I need to really pray to him and ask for his help and his guidance and his ilm and his wisdom. Then during the day, in the middle of the day, Zuhur prayer, Maghrib prayer, Isha prayer, they are all designated times that I need to pray. So I'm more focusing on why I need to pray these times. And I believe this is, again, mindfulness is not as a term, not maybe a term that we study in Islam, but actually we have that concept of praying 5 times a day, and those times changing daily. So you have to really keep up those changes, being in alignment with the time that you are in, and focusing on the meaning of those times. That's one of the spiritual tools that I have as well. And I'll finish with this. I did have other slides on the siblings, but we didn't have time to that. So this is, I'll finish with this one. I always, when I look at my son, the guest from Jannah, the guest from heaven, I always think that all the ustads that we know, all the imams, sheikhs, scholars, the really like the pious people that we know, none of them has the guarantee that they are going to go to Jannah. We all are here to go through those tests and hardships and imtihan in dunya. And at the end, we all hope and we pray that we will pass these tests. And inshallah, we'll go to Jannah to meet with our Prophet, inshallah, and to meet with Allah, Jamalullah, inshallah. But this is the struggle that we have. This is why we are here. And we are all scared that we may not pass this test. And we have this, I especially quoted this hadith here. It's where our Prophet says that, when he was asked to warn the closest to him, he got up and said, "O people of Quraysh," to his people, "buy or save yourselves from the hellfire, as I cannot save you from Allah's punishment. O Bani Abdul Manaf, I cannot save you from Allah's punishment. O Safiya, the aunt of Allah's messenger, I cannot save you from Allah's punishment. O Fatima bint Muhammad, ask me anything from my wealth, but I cannot save you from Allah's punishment." We are going to go through those doors that even the daughter of our Prophet Muhammad is not guaranteed, but my son is guaranteed. I know that. He's definitely going to go to Jannah, inshallah. And I guess knowing that is the strongest tool that I have, because I know that in my house, no one can say, except the people, the parents that have special needs, kids who has, especially that don't have the intellectual capacity to understand why they are in this world. Only us can say that we have someone in our home that is definitely going to go to Jannah. and that is a guest from Jannah in our houses, and it's my son Ejmal, who is our guest from Jannah, alhamdulillah. So I think that's enough. Sorry, I took over your times. I kind of was planning to talk about his siblings as well, how they are affected, how the relationship with your spouse is affected as well, but I don't think they are really necessary at this point. And I'll finish with this version of a very famous saying: it takes a village to raise a child. And I guess it takes a child with special needs to raise the consciousness of the village as well. Thank you for listening.
Wow, Allahu Akbar, I've got goosebumps. That was very profound. MashaAllah. I don't want it to end. MashaAllah, that was very eloquently spoken. I've learned so much about you, and I've learned so much about a special needs child, and I'm just so inspired right now. And ready, I think, essentially to take on whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, any challenge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throws at us. Everything that you said definitely applies across the board to people with special needs and people who know people with special needs and people without special needs. So that was really, really amazing. I would love to have Q&A, but we've run out of time. So if anyone has any questions, please email us, and inshallah we'll forward the questions to Sister Nesibe. And I'm thinking part 2, because that literally just like was the tip of the iceberg, especially that last closing comment that you mentioned, Sister Nesibe. That was quite powerful. Like, I'm still processing that village to raise a child one. So inshallah, if Sister Nesibe is willing, we'll love to have her back to continue talking about the relationships, about the spouse and the children and whatnot. Thanks again for coming. Just to let you guys know as well, this Friday we have Ramadan preparation. I'll share it real quick. I have a Ramadan preparation for online. It's it's online, it's free event. We have a speaker from Western Australia. We have 2 of our lecturers who will be running the session. So yeah, we look forward to seeing you on Friday, and we'll probably won't run one of these classes in Ramadan. Usually we run it every month. Inshallah, after Ramadan, we'll run the next monthly halaqah. Jazakallah khair for attending, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.